In this lecture, we shall take up the question of the motion of charges in a metallic wire, and you know the motion of charges constitutes a current. So, we start with electric current. So, first of all, let us see the nature of conduction in metals. You know that metals are very high densities, the number of atoms per unit volume is very large, of the order of 10 to the power 30, and they get crushed, all the atoms they get crushed against each other, with the result that a few electrons I have shown here, they become delocalized. That means, they do not belong to any particular atom, and these electrons can move if there is a potential difference across, and these electrons are called free electrons. Now, during its motion inside a conductor, an electron collides continuously with the atoms. At each collision, the electron changes its course, so its motion is truly random. If we focus attention on any cross section of a conductor, there is no net flow of electrons in any direction. Let me show you this first. Here I have a piece of wire, a metallic wire, and I have the motion of electrons when there is no electric field applied, when there is no potential difference applied. Now, the electrons move in random directions, and if I choose this cross section, there is no flow of electrons either to the left or to the right, and this is how the things happen. Here we have one electron, this electron collides with this atom, changes direction, collides with this atom, changes direction, and so on. Ultimately, it comes here, and there is no net displacement of electrons. The electron keeps colliding, and on an average it remains at the same place. Here I have removed the atoms, and I have shown you the kicks that each electron gets as it collides with an atom. So, you can see this is random motion, and there is no possibility of any displacement. Now, I apply an electric field, then the electron feels a force in a direction opposite to that of the field. The field is in this direction, and the electrons get a kick in the opposite direction, get acceleration in the opposite direction. And now, what happens? On each of these vectors, which were random, I am now adding a systematic component to the right. So, what happens is that we get this, that there is now slight displacement of electrons. So, when an electric field is applied, then there is collisions of course continue, but on top of collisions we have now a directional motion of the electrons, random but directional motion of the electrons. So, they move in a direction opposite to the electric field, and you can see as they move they also collide, but because of the electric field there is net displacement of electrons. We say that the electrons are drifting in the direction opposite to the electric field. Because of this drift, there is now a net flow of electrons towards the end of the conductor, which is at a higher potential. This is at a higher potential, so the electrons are moving towards this. You can see the motion is still random. This flow constitutes the electric current. Electric current is, as you know, flow of charges. The collisions which impede the motion of electrons gives rise to resistance of the conductor. So, these collisions they impede the motion of the electron, and therefore, it is called resistance. They apply resistance to the motion of electrons. If we apply very strong electric field, then all the electrons move almost orderly, but if we do not have a strong electric field, then the motion is like this, random motion. And in this circuit, when there is a flow of current through the wires, then there is a current flow of current to the bulb, and the bulb gets lighted, bulb gets glows. The measure of the current is the charge that flows across a cross section of the wire in 1 second. Let me go back to this. I have chosen this cross section, and I find the number of electrons moving through this cross section, and then the rate at which the electrons move across this cross section is the current, the flow of charge per second. Remember that this is only when electric field is very strong, otherwise the motion is random. Even then, through a cross section the electrons drift, and therefore, the flow of charge through any cross section per second is called current. So, I can define mathematically current as delta q by delta t, and in the limit of delta t going to 0, this becomes dq by dt. So, the current is dq by dt. The SI unit of charge is coulomb, you know that, its symbol is capital C. The unit of current is called an ampere and its symbol is capital A, and 1 ampere is 1 coulomb of current flowing through any cross section every second. The fundamental unit of charge we have seen earlier also is an electron, which has charge given by this number. And one of the wonders of nature is that charge on the proton is exactly equal to that of the electron. So, the protons inside the nucleus, they can exactly cancel the charge due to an equal number of electrons outside the nucleus. So, therefore, the atom is completely neutral without any charge, and if the charge exists, then it is always an integral multiple of either electron charge or proton charge. We do talk of quarks. Quarks are the constituents of particles like neutrons and protons, and inside these neutrons and protons quarks exist, which are thought to have charge which is fractional, but outside these particles the charge is always an integral unit of this charge, integral multiple of this charge. We have seen how an electron collides with atoms as it drifts through the wire. The time between two successive collisions is obviously not equal. So, what we do is we take a average, but since the number of electrons is very large, this average is equal to the average of average times for all electrons. That is, if you take all the electrons, find the average time between collisions, then take their average, that is the average time between two collisions, and this is called relaxation time, and it is denoted by this Greek letter tau. The distance travelled by the electron during this time, which is the same as the average distance travelled by it between successive collisions, is called the mean free path. See, there is the average time between two collisions, and there is also the average distance between the two collisions. This is called the mean free path. Once again, we take average of averages of all electrons, and we find the mean free path, and the speed with which the electrons drift is called the drift speed. So, it can be shown again because of the large number of electrons that the average drift speed of an electron is the same as the average of average drift speeds of all the electrons. So, we denote the average drift speed by V d. If E is the magnitude of the electric field intensity, then the force experienced by an electron is E, and if m e is the mass of the electron, then the acceleration it acquires is A e by m e. And since this is the acceleration in time tau, which is the average time between two collisions, it acquires a speed which is given by V d, the drift speed, and it is equal to E e by m e times tau. Consider now a conductor in which the electrons are drifting to the right with the speed V d. So, this is how the electrons drift, and I have this piece of wire, and I have chosen a cylindrical region with a length equal to V d. So, that all the electrons present right from this point, they can cross this cross section A in 1 second. So, I have chosen this length of the cylinder equal to V d. So, that in 1 second all the electrons in this, they will cross this cross section. So, what is the charge that crosses this? The number of electrons in this is A is the area of cross section, V d is the length. Therefore, A times V d is the volume, and if the number density is n, then A times n times V d is the number of electrons, and if I multiply this by the charge of the electron, then that is the charge that comes out through cross section A. So, that charge is ENA VD, and therefore, the current, because this is a charge that comes out every second, therefore, the current is ENA VD, and we can express this current as a function of E. We have already found VD as function of E, which is VD equal to EE by ME times tau. So, we substitute this and we get I equal to E squared NA tau by ME times E. So, the current comes out to be proportional to the electric field, and electric field is due to the potential difference. Therefore, the current, we shall see in a moment, is proportional to the potential difference. So, as expected, the current in a conductor is proportional to the strength of the electric field applied along the conductor. So, if L is the length of the conductor and V is the potential difference across this conductor, then the field is V by L, and we will substitute E equal to V by L, and we get I equal to E squared NA tau by MEL times V. That means, I can write I equal to V by R, where R now is ME times L by E squared NA tau. And you see two things: R is proportional to the length of the conductor, and it is inversely proportional to the area of cross section of the conductor. And this relation I equal to V by R is known as Ohm's law. You know it very well. And the resistance has this expression. This gives an insight into the mechanism for the conductor offering resistance to the flow of current. The collisions between the electrons and atoms, that provides the resistance to the flow of current. And since resistance is proportional to L and inversely proportional to A, therefore, I can write R as rho times L by A, where rho now the specific resistance, which is the characteristic of a material, is also called resistivity of the material, and this is given by ME by E squared N tau. This is a characteristic of the material. It does not change. You change the length, you change the cross section, it does not change. Specific resistance or resistivity, they are characteristic of a material, they do not change. And the reciprocal of rho is called the conductivity of the material. Equation I equal to ENA VD can now be used to estimate the drift speed. So, VD is I by ENA. So, I allow a certain current, and then I know the area of cross section, I know E, I know the density in that material, therefore, I can find VD. And turns out the VD is of the order of only 10 to the power minus 5 meters per second, of the order of very small quantity, 10 to the power minus 5 meters per second. That means that the electrons drift extremely slowly. How can then any meaningful current ever be established in a conductor? Remember that the current is charge per unit time, and even if the time each electron takes to pass through a cross section is very large, because of the drift is so slow, the number of them passing through the cross section is extremely large. You see 10 to the power 30 atoms per meter cube, and a large number of them can pass through a cross section even if they drift very slowly. So, a current can be established. How is that the light of the bulb comes on instantaneously? This is the question we often debate. As soon as we put the switch in the on position, the bulb glows immediately. How does this happen? Let us see. The signal of the electric field may be likened to the command of a military general. You see, let me go back a little. As soon as the potential difference or electric field is established, all these electrons are ordered. Who orders them? The electric field. The signal travels with the velocity of almost velocity of light, the signal that each electron must now start moving. And how do they move? Just like the soldiers, I mean, a general gives a command, and soldiers, wherever they are, they start moving. The signal that the electric field sends out to the electrons to start drifting travels in the conductor with nearly the speed of light, and reaches wherever it may have to reach, reaches in a very short time, almost instantaneously. Therefore, whenever switch is put in the on position, the light, the bulb glows, because the time taken, even if the bulb is, let us say, several meters away, it does not matter, the time taken is very short, the signal travels with the velocity of light, and therefore, the current flows immediately and we have the bulb glowing. You are often asked why the bulb glows immediately. The electrons do reach, but one electron is not sufficient to make the bulb glow. So, what happens is this: once the electrons start drifting, the electrons nearest to the bulb gets into its filament, then the next nearest and so on. So, the each one starts drifting to the bulb, and when sufficient number reaches the bulb starts glowing. It is like opening a water tap. The tap is somewhere else and we have a, let us say, a tube. Then what happens? As soon as we open the tap, the water starts coming out of the tube. Now, it does not wait for that water which is near the tap to come here. Whatever water was here, it starts flowing, next one, and so on, the water starts flowing. Same is the case with the current. The electron nearest to the bulb goes into the filament, then the next, then the next, then the next, and when a large number goes through the bulb, then the current is set up and the bulb glows. It must therefore be understood that as soon as the electric field or electric potential is set up in a circuit, the current starts flowing. This we have discussed. The potential difference is established when there is an unbroken connection between the two terminals of the battery. That is important. We have a here key. If the key can be anywhere, but if the key is not in the on position, then the circuit is broken and therefore, the current does not flow. Unless the circuit is unbroken, that is, the key is in the on position, these 2 points are joined, the current will not flow. Where this key can be, it does not matter, it can be anywhere. As long as it is open, no current flows. If it is closed, then the current flows and the things happen. If I plot I against V, if I establish a certain potential difference across a wire and find out the current, then this is the graph I get, and the slope of this graph is 1 by r, because V is I times r or I is V by r, therefore, this slope is 1 by r. And these devices which have this linear relation between I and V, they are called ohmic devices. Ohmic is from Ohm's law. So, they are called ohmic devices because they obey Ohm's law. Non-ohmic devices, when the relationship between I and V is not linear, as in this case. This is a p-n junction. There the relation between I and V is not linear. Therefore, it is a non-ohmic device. If I combine resistances one after the other, they are said to be in series, and in fact, they constitute one whole long conductor, and therefore, the resistances are added. Here we have resistance R 1, R 2, R 3, they are all in series. The current flows through this R 1, then through R 2, then through R 3. It is not divided, it does not get divided anywhere. So, it flows through R 1, R 2, R 3, R 1, R 2, R 3 are said to be in series, and potential difference across R 1 is I R 1, across R 2 is I R 2, across R 3 is I R 3, and sum of these must be equal to the total potential difference, and therefore, the effective resistance is V by the effective current I, and therefore, the effective resistance is just the sum of the resistances in series. When there is a division of current, as it happens at point A, some current goes to R 2, some goes to R 3, then R 3 and R 2 are said to be in parallel. R 2 is parallel to R 3, and whatever the effective resistance of this is in series with R 1. And since the potential difference across these two is the same, therefore, I have current through this is V by R 2, current through this is V by R 3, and the total current is V by the sum of these two currents, and therefore, if I substitute the values V A B by R effective is the resistance of the parallel combination, that is the potential difference which is equal across R 2 plus V A B by R 3. Therefore, R effective is given by this expression. So, in parallel combination, the resistances have effective resistances given by this formula, and the resistance gets reduced in fact. In this lecture, we have seen first how the free electrons flow through a wire. There are a lot of collisions and they flow randomly, but when an electric field is applied, they get a drift in the direction, not electrons get drift in the direction opposite to that of the electric field, and they constitute the current. And the collisions between electrons and atoms, they provide the resistance to the flow of current. And the resistances, when they are one after the other, they are said to be in series, they are added up. When they are parallel, that it means that there is a division of current through two resistances. They are in parallel and their value is given by, the effective value is given by 1 by R effective equal to 1 by R 1 plus 1 by R 2 plus 1 by R 3 and so on, and we can work out what R effective would be. The net result is that R effective is less than either of the resistances in parallel arrangement. In the next lecture, we will continue with this discussion of current electricity.
There are many rules and laws in science, and many repercussions take place because of that. Today we are going to learn about one such rule called the Ohm's law, Ohm because of the scientist, and the rule is very simple. In an electrical circuit, the current that flows in the circuit depends upon the potential difference that you supply to it, provided the resistance of the conductor remains the same throughout, meaning thereby that the conductor physical conditions such as the temperature, the pressure on it or its dilution does not change. Now, what is a conductor? A conductor is one which has charge carriers that can flow freely in it. So, a metal is a good conductor, fluid electrolytes are good conductors. We are going to use that rule to find the resistance per centimeter of a wire using the wire as the conductor in question, and thereafter establish Ohm's law. Also try and see if this experiment can help us find the material property of specific resistance of the wire. In order to do that, we require some apparatus. The apparatus per se would be a battery eliminator, a key, a rheostat, an ammeter, a voltmeter and the wire in question. What will be the principle of its working? As we have just said that it would be Ohm's law, and what would be pertaining to that? That supposing we say that the potential difference is proportional to the current flowing through it. So, V is equal to K I, and if we were to plot a graph between V and I, then the slope would be giving us the value of K. We can also put it this way, that the current flowing through the conductor can tell us how much of potential difference is across it, in which case we can say that the voltage developed or the potential difference developed across the conductor is proportional to the current flowing through it. So, V is proportional to I, or V is equal to I R. This R becomes the resistance of that conductor. It is primarily that which we are going to use here. We also know that for a conductor which is like a wire, the resistance depends upon the material, which is its specific resistance, length of the wire and area of cross section, which we can show as A. Let us make use of all this knowledge and try and find the resistance of this wire first. But if we are looking at resistance per centimeter, the wire length that we choose should be known. So, in order to find an accurate value of wire length and place it in the circuit in that way, we need a ruler and connect one end of the wire to the terminal in question across the voltmeter and measure using a scale, make a kink at the length desired and place the wire in such a way that the kink is just outside the terminal. The reason being that the terminal material is a good conductor and any length of wire which is thereafter, that means say this portion, is not going to be in the circuit. In order to revise our circuit and to understand the circuit clearly, we must remember that the ammeter should always be placed in series and the voltmeter should always be placed in parallel with the conductor across which we want the potential difference. What is the role that each of these plays here? K is well defined. This provides the potential difference to the circuit. Without this nothing would work. What does the key do? It allows you to choose when you want the current to flow in the circuit and when it should not. So, on and off device. Then this measures the current flowing. This is the variable resistance and it is going to allow us to change the value of current in the entire circuit. The current change here will develop different potential difference across this wire, which can be measured in this connection. So, let us do this experiment, set up an observation table. What do we require to do? So, first and foremost we need to find the range of the meters, the least count of the 2 meters and the least count of the ruler. So, what do we have here? The ammeter, the range is from 0 to 1.5 that we can record. We can find the least count by determining the number of divisions between 0 and 1. If we see this carefully, there are 40 divisions. So, 1 upon 40 is my least count, which calculates to 0.025 amperes. Likewise, look at this voltmeter. The range is from 0 to 1.5 volts and there are 40 divisions again between 0 and 1. So, my least count for this meter as well is 0.025 volts. Least count for the meter scale by which we measure the length of the resistance wire is 1 millimeter and the length of the wire as we had checked out was 20 centimeters. Let us now start taking our readings. I switch on the eliminator, put the key in and let us observe the reading in the ammeter. The ammeter reading is 5 divisions. We can take and record the reading in divisions and later multiply it by the least count to get the real value in amperes. The corresponding voltmeter reading as we can see is 10 divisions. We change the value of current in the circuit using the rheostat and observe that the ammeter reading is 8 divisions and the voltmeter reading is 18. I change again. Ammeter reading is 12 divisions and the voltmeter reading as we see here is 26 divisions. We take more readings like this. The ammeter reading is now 16 divisions and our corresponding voltmeter reading is 35 divisions. One more reading we can take here. In this way we can take at least 5 readings. minimum of 5 are required because we plan to plot a graph, and if you have to plot a graph, you should not have less than 5 readings, because a graph shows a variation between two physical quantities. You can plot a graph with as many number of readings, but it is pointless if you go beyond that also, because the variation will remain the same. So, the ammeter reading this time is 13 divisions and the voltmeter reading is 28 divisions. Having found this, you can set out to do the calculations. Let me just put this off. You can set to do the calculations. What calculations are required? The resistance of the wire, which you will get by two means. One, by dividing the value of voltage with current, and the second would be by using the graph. So, in both ways you can find the value of resistance. Then calculate the resistance per centimeter. We can calculate our value for resistance by dividing the voltmeter divisions by the ammeter, and approximately if you see just by looking at the readings, this value comes out to be almost the same. When you plot a graph with these readings, you can take a mean value of the line. From the slope, you can find out the value for resistance as also resistance per centimeter by using the length that you had already taken earlier. You can then also use it to find the value for specific resistance, in which case you will require additional reading of the area of cross section. You can use a screw gauge for that. You can make more extensions to this experiment. You can use any electrolyte, find its resistance. Where can we go wrong in this experiment? One, which you normally children make a mistake, and that is connecting the ammeter not in series. You have to have your ammeter in series, so that all the current flows through it, and the voltmeter should always be connected in parallel with the conductor. The current flows through the conductor. So, this is in parallel with that. So, this should always be taken into account. All your connections should be tight. You should have current not flowing endlessly in the circuit. You should use the circuit only as and when required. So, switch it off when you do not need it or you are not taking readings. These are some of the precautions which you need to take, and you will get good results. And what extensions can you do? How can you do more project work with this? You can find out how much of the resistance is there for a wire by using a crocodile clip instead of placing it here, taking a definite length. You can choose different lengths by keeping this wire end loose, connecting a crocodile clip to the other and connecting at different lengths, and therefore, putting that in the circuit. So, you can have a variation with that. So, there are many things that you can do with this experiment, finding area of cross section of a wire, finding out whether it is homogeneous or not. Homogeneous means that the entire wire is made up of the same material. You can find that out as well. You can have a selection from the market where the wire is not made out of the same material throughout, in which case your resistance per centimeter would change, and that should indicate that it is not as they are quoting it to be. So, these are some of the things that you can do with this simple apparatus in the lab, and I hope you can use it for more things and more work around your home also.